Olá pessoal, hoje a gente tem um episódio muito especial com um convidado internacional e eu vou mudar agora para o inglês. Esse episódio vai ter subtitles aqui, vai ter legendas, mas vamos lá. First of all, we are here with Brett King. Brett King is a good friend of mine, international speaker. He's a brand himself, so futurist, podcaster, entrepreneur, and all of that. And we're gonna have a very cool discussion.
Eu sou futurista e escrevo livro.
And he's learning Portuguese as well, so that's cool. But this one is gonna be in English, and we're going to talk about the next big global changes that we're going through as a society and how that impacts the future of financial services. And this chat starts in a few seconds. Okay, so here we are now in English, talking with Brett King, a good friend of mine. Is a great chance to have him here in Brazil in our podcast to discuss not only the future of financial services, but Brett is also exploring a lot of futurism, about the big changes that we are going through as a society. So, Brett, it's an honor to have you here.
It's only fair. You've been on my podcast recently.
Yeah, so, that's cool.
It's good to work with you again.
And it's good to have you in person.
I know.
It's a very good chance. So the stars aligned, and here we are. So, Brett, I think this is just for starters, I would like to understand with you, if you have the chance to say a few things about your early days, about your career, for some of the people that might not know you, which is a shame, because you're, a must know guy for everyone. Need to know about you, about what you do. But anyways, I think it would be good to go through your early days in the financial industry as a futurist, and as an author,
sure.
and then all the way through everything you do as a speaker and a global speaker, and all the new stuff that you're doing right now.
So I actually started my career as a technologist, as a coder, programmer.
Oh, nice.
I have to be careful with that because I said on one podcast I was interviewed, I used the term a slang term for a programmer as a byte ripper.
Oh, yeah.
And it somehow got translated as a rapper. So people asked me when I was a rapper, and I was like, no.
That's unusual, right?
No, not a rapper. But yeah, I started as a technologist.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of work with major brands on the .com strategy. I was in Hong Kong in the noughties, and worked on HSBC's .com strategy. And then moved to Dubai in 2006, and while working on digital strategy in Dubai, because Dubai was an upcoming market at the time, and then ended up moving when Bank 2.0 launched in 2010. It was my first book that blew up in a good way, became a bestseller in 20 countries, and that now allowed me the opportunity to go to live in New York. And I took a role as a resident futurist for a digital agency specializing in design and architecture for the banking sector, But always I've been on that sort of cusp of advancing technology and technology strategy, a lot for financial services, but I've done, other industries as well. But yeah, it's been a wild ride.
Fantastic. When you moved to New York City, you were like an independent consultant, or like you were starting Moven or another project?
Good question. Yeah. So I did the book launch for Bank 2.0 was in April 2010 in Singapore. You may know Emmanuel Daniel from Asian Banker. So he helped me launch that. So shout out to ED if he's listening. And I launched the book there in Singapore. My publisher at the time, Marshall, was a little bit careful about the book. They didn't know if it was going to go off or not. So we did a limited print run, and it went very well in those, at the launch of the... At the Asian Banking Summit. Then I went to London in June, and then July to New York. and then to Los Angeles on the West Coast, and launched in August.
Fantastic.
In July, when I was in New York, I met with Josh and Shamir from Simple, and I met Alex Sion. And Alex and I had been having some contact about working together.
Yeah.
And I had the idea already for starting my own bank, because I knew the fintech boom was going to be huge.
Yeah.
I missed the .com boom to some
Sure.
extent, but I knew this was the perfect opportunity, and I wanted to build a mobile bank. And so on August the 8th, 2010, while I was doing the book tour for Bank 2.0, I registered the domain movenbank.com.
Oh, nice.
And I was actually at a book launch in Santa Monica in LA, and there was a VC at the launch of the book, and he said, I was describing how we would download a bank account, how we would pay for our phone, how you would get access to instant credit, and you'd have behavioral savings tools and things in the app. And his response was, but banks are not going to do this.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're too stuck in their product mindset and so forth. So who's going to do this?
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to do it. And that afternoon I went and registered the domain. And that was the start of Moven Bank. Yeah. So that was August 2010. And then November I went back to New York, or I moved to New York. Alex and I started working together. And I remember having coffee with him at 5 Penn Plaza near Penn Station in New York, and I pitched the idea of Moven to him, and he's like, I'm in. So he became my co-founder, and we officially launched. So April 2011, we set up the company. We officially launched Moven at Cybos in October of 2011.
Fantastic. Yeah. And back then, you basically got all the ideas that you put on your book and try to make it tangible through Moven, right? And in the end, it also become, because I know that you had some deals with some big consulting firms as well to distribute the solution as well. So a little bit more about how it progressed and evolved over time during the time you've been working the project.
Well, the core thing was, I'd done a lot of work on .com strategy for banks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I had worked on HSBC's global .com strategy, Standard Chartered, Citibank, many of these big brands. When I came out with Bank 2.0, a lot of bankers, because it was really the first real digital banking thesis, that got broad coverage. And a lot of bankers I would meet, they would say, yeah, I looked at your book. It's very nice, but this stuff is really hard to do. Right? And I was like, no, that's BS. I will show you how to do it. I'll build my own bank. This was the motivation behind this, to prove that could be done. And Moven broke a lot of ground. We were the first app where you could get a debit card in the world, right? We were the first app that used the homepage of the app to help you understand how you use your money. Because you remember when banking apps back in those days, you log in and be checking account, savings account, mortgage, credit card, right? You just see the list of products the bank gave you.
Yeah.
When you logged into Moven, you would see a spending meter that showed you how much money you'd spent this month and compared with normal. And the app would turn red if you were spending more than normal, or green if you were spending less than normal, because this encouraged good financial behavior. No one had ever done anything like this. And today, that sort of circular artifact we call the spending meter, Revolut copied it, Starling copied it, Monzo copied it, and so forth. It became a design pattern.
Yeah.
We were the first mobile app in the world to use real-time notifications with categorization of spend. So when you tap your phone, at that time, we didn't have Apple Pay or Google Pay.
Yeah.
We had a contactless sticker we put on the back of the phone, right? Yeah. An RFID tag. So you tap your phone and you get a notification on the phone with the receipt, geotag, and the categorization. So if you're at Starbucks, dining out, and the receipt would actually tell you you've spent this much on dining out this month, and it's more than you spend normally.
Got it.
So it was a behavioral tool, really, as much as anything else. And you could turn on and off your debit card in the app. right?
All those features that are like standard features,
Right,
but you
we were
started
the first.
That's
We were the first,
so
yeah.
fantastic because and I think the skepticism that all the bankers had about the solution and you proving that okay, there's a consumer centric designed to be applied in these features and try to reinvent the way that people and it's cool to see that you had the chance to talk about that with the book and had all this keynotes that you delivered back then, and also how it evolved and matured, and
Exactly.
and now it became like something that is everywhere. And the cool thing is, looking back at your early days, talking about financial innovation and all of that, I'm pretty sure you saw all the different moments that we're going through. I think perhaps in the beginning, much more talking. The talk was all about digital banking, and you prove it about with Moven and your book that there is a change to be made back then, and then digital transformation of banks, all the stuff. Can you say a few things about how about all the changes and the moments and the milestones that we've been going through, and if there's some specific conversations that 2010 was like all about digital banking and so on so forth.
Well, I mean, one of the interesting things is I made some bets. I'm a futurist, right?
Yeah.
So I made some bets in Bank 2.0, some that turned out to be very accurate, some not so, right? So one that, I predicted the decline of branch banking back in 2005, really, right? I actually, this is interesting. The book that became Bank 2.0 actually started as a strategy report for HSBC in 2005, which was called HSBC 2.0, which was looking at what HSBC would look like in 2020. Right.
Got it.
And in that, I said basically 2008, internet will overtake branches for transactional activity, and by 2015, mobile would overtake both the branch and the internet. Now, at the time, that was a big deal because remember, this was 2005. We didn't have smartphones.
Yeah.
Right. So it was a pretty big bet.
It was a long shot.
Yeah. So 2010, when Bank 2 came out, so Bank 2009 was when I finished that book. But in there, I predicted that by 2030, that branches in the United States would be half what they were at the time in 2010. Right?
Oh, yeah.
I also predicted that mobile wallets would overtake plastic cards by 2017.
Yeah.
And I predicted that paper checks, would be eliminated for most of the world by 2018, right?
But yeah, this part, they're still on in the US.
So the checks are still used in the US, which blows my mind. But so 2016, I predicted mobile wallets would overtake cards, and that was 2017 and that's mainly driven by the mobile wallets in China.
Oh,
right?
got it.
Because they and today, next year, essentially mobile wallets will do twice the transactions of plastic cards and tokenized cards. So, value store-based wallets and rails like Pix and UPI and so forth. Combined, this will be about 60% of all retail transactions, and about 30% are cards and tokenized cards. So this includes Apple Pay and Samsung Pay and so forth. So so that was pretty spot on. And as you know, we just worked on a book together, Branch Today, Gone Tomorrow, which comes out next year, which shows that we hit peak branch in 2015. Which is breaking news because that's never been published before. So I feel like I pretty much got that right. But I think the big milestones and changes that have happened since then is we're really in the mobile first era in terms of banking now. Yeah. You have Nubank, which is the largest bank outside of Asia, and if you look at the top 50 fastest growing financial institutions in the world, none of them are a traditional bank, right?
Yeah.
And so you've got Revolut now with coming up on 50 million customers in this month. and they will, like how that compares with HSBC with 39 million customers now, right?
That's amazing.
Nubank has almost twice the customers of Itaú, right? Of course, Banco de Brazil is larger, but Itaú was the most valuable bank in Brazil until Nubank came along. And then you've got WeBank in China, in Shenzhen, with 450 million customers now. Alipay with 1.6 billion customers. So, the fact is, and the data from the new book is, we for the top 20 fintechs in the world, they now have 4 billion customers, and the top 20 banks, 2.7 billion customers. So this is the biggest milestone for me. I was talking about all of this, 15 years ago, about how technology-based banking would be the standard for the way we move forward, and that's clearly the reality now.
Fantastic. Yeah, and that's a very interesting progression to witness, and some of the numbers you definitely got it right, but I think there's a lot of things to happen as well, because you see players like Nubank, and you had the chance to talk to Davi Vélez.
Yes.
Very recently.
Yeah, I'm interviewing him for a new book I'm working on, which is called The Rise of the Challengers.
Oh, fantastic.
Which is basically trying to document all of these. So Nick from Revolut, I interviewed Max from N26, Josh and Shamir, Alex, all my friends who started these challenger banks, Tavit from Wise, all these guys. I want to interview them and sort of document this next generation of financial services infrastructure that we see emerging, how that happened over the last decade,
Fantastic. And all those guys, when they started under a new, type of infrastructure. They have been built from scratch in a very different way, and the way they operate and how they are asset light and all of that is very different from the big players. And how have you been witnessing this change of the incumbents facing also the challengers, and there's a lot been going on, and they still struggle with legacy systems and all of that, and they've been surpassed, like Nubank you just mentioned. They are like the number one brand in Brazil, so they even surpassed, if I'm not mistaken, Petrobras, which is an oil company that we have here as one.
That's awesome. I gotta use that stat, man. That's amazing.
So the last time we spoke in your podcast, I said it was third place.
Yes.
And the Petrobras is the first place.
Right.
Another recent article that I read, it was overtaken by Nubank. So how we still see the incumbents navigating that. Did they are they getting how to do it right now, after all they saw, after the initial doubt that happened long ago? It seems like a long time ago, but I still see that some players didn't grasp it in the way.
It's some people have described digital transformation of the banking sector like trying to replace an engine on an Airbus while you're flying at 30,000 feet, and it's not hard. That's the point. But here's the thing: when we launched Moven, and subsequently after you saw we launched Moven in 2011, then you had Simple was late 2010, Fidor was 2010, and then Starling was late 2013, early 2014. Then you had Monzo, then you had Nubank, WeBank, and stuff come along. So it was those first 5 years of the 2010s where you saw this explosion of possibility. And back in those days, what did you hear from the incumbents? These guys are never going to make money.
Yeah.
They're never going to be profitable. They're only growing at this rate because they're so small. They'll never be able to manage risk as good as us. There was a broad denial that this industry needed to change.
Sure.
But as we can see with these brands that have been so successful, that obviously there was a latent need for better banking powered by digital to reduce friction and just make the experience better. And that's how the challengers have won. They've won on experience and simplicity. So the banks have rejected that as a premise because, their process and policy and technology stack really created complexity. I mean, the argument for banks for so long was the reason you need to speak to a banker is because we have such complex products, right? Whereas a digital, player is going to say, let's reduce the complexity. Let's take the complexity out.
Exactly.
And so today you can't say these banks are not profitable. Nubank is one of the most profitable companies per employee in Brazil, as WeBank is. You can't say that they're only growing because they're small. Nubank is the largest bank outside of Asia, right? Revolut is larger than the biggest banks in Europe. You can't say that they're worse at managing risk. WeBank, Alipay's lending practice, Nubank's credit card business, they all have much lower delinquency or NPL ratios than the traditional banks because we now understand managing risk is a data modeling problem, right? It's not a policy or process issue. So the only thing that's left right now is the banks are saying, yes, but they don't have the asset size, right? And my answer to the banks on that is, please explain to me, how is your asset size going to help you absorb artificial intelligence into your tech stack and be competitive in the next generation of banking? And the answer is it won't, right? So maybe 10% of the incumbents will make it through the next 20 years. And I think by the end of 2030, like 2030 timeframe, I think you're going to see incredible consolidation in the traditional banking space in markets like continental Europe and the US and Latin America, where the digital players have become so dominant and so built into the framework, particularly with AI-based agency, that you're going to see a massive consolidation. Some fintechs will buy some banks to get assets, but
in the retail space, right?
No, corporate as well.
Corporate as well,
because
right?
I think think of what's going to make a big difference in terms of banking and operational efficiency for a business. It's going to be able to integrate autonomous finance into your business, right? And the banks are still asking corporates to sign pieces of paper, right? So the smart contracting stuff, it's going to be companies like Adyen, Stripe, Nubank, and so forth, I think, that are building that next generation infrastructure. Nubank's acquisition of Hyperleap is a good example of this. We are starting to see Stripe is doing some amazing things there. Klarna, out of the EU. So the next generation of AI-based banking infrastructure is most likely going to align with the technology stacks that are agile enough to support it. And this is not the fragmented silo technology platforms the banks have. They have to essentially, like Itaú and HSBC have to essentially become Nubank or Revolut from a technology and culture perspective to be able to compete. And that, for those types of banks, given their structure and the way they think, is going to be extremely difficult.
And it's a matter of to be able to do so is a matter of imploding what they have, and rebuilding something new on top of that. Because I've been talking a lot about also autonomous banking, assisted finance, everything that comes along with AI, and when you see the potential of that and this heavy infrastructure that the banks got, the incumbent banks got, it's just like there's no fit, and it's just like a need of it's basically an implosion of the model, and in an accelerated way. I think we've been seeing that, little by little, but now it's going to be massive, and talking about the next chapter for also the challenger banks, we also see a lot of those players taking advantage of their larger customer base, the fact that they're beloved and all that, and they're going beyond banking as well. You see the case for Nubank with their telco operation now, and it's good to see how they started from banking and finance, and now how they're taking other aspects of people's lives, and that's so cool to see. And we've been seeing that in Asia as well, with all the super apps.
Yep.
And but it's good to see how it translates to different geographies, because of course the market elements from China is, the competition, it's all different from what we see in the West.
Actually, this is a good point, Bruno, because, if you think about China, Americans have a very hard time understanding this because they've never, most Americans have never been to China, but China is at least 10 years ahead of the United States
For sure.
on this type of infrastructure.
Definitely.
Think about real-time payments, right? Pix is the fastest growing payments rails in the world now, based here in Brazil. 80% of the population adoption, incredible progress. UPI in India, 80% of retail commerce will go through UPI rails by 2027. 92% of all retail payments in China are mobile now. But China opened up the real-time payments rails in 2014.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then, we talk about open banking. China was the first to do open fintech, right? Which was they had to take the Alipay and WeChat data and allow that to be consumed by the banks.
Yeah.
Right. So a two-way consumption. So already you see, China has blockchain cores, and it has, they're starting to put real estate and property records on the blockchain. China's building a machine-readable economy, right? The US is so far away from this, right? And so you still have economies, particularly like Europe, more aligned with the US philosophically, but Brazil, India, China, the BRICS nations are where we're going to see the next generation of autonomous trading cross-border, the use of CBDCs and stable coins, I think really done with that agentic AI model. So it's an exciting time to be in the space.
For sure. And talking about that, the emerging players, the emerging markets is like China, for instance. Do you believe that because they need to leapfrog and basically build some of the infrastructure, not from scratch, but it wasn't that advanced? And for example, US now and even Europe, maybe they are in a situation that they are, because of the infrastructure that they already have in place, they have been capped by all of that and cannot advance that much because the old players and the old infrastructure still holds that advance. And it's just like the case of when you see no perspective, because it's just like the checks. It's just like there's a cultural element on that, and there are some players that wants to keep the establishment.
Well, let me give you an even better example, I think, which is sort of a more economics, or philosophical approach.
Yeah.
So we've had the Paris Accord for a few years now, since COP26, I guess it was, and talking about the need to restrict the rise of global temperatures by 1.5 degrees. And as part of that, you have to have a commitment to renewables. So this year, 30% of all energy produced on the planet is renewable, but it could be 100%. Right? Why isn't it? It's because of those traditional industries holding on to the profit that they make from fossil fuels. 10 million people die every year from exposure to air pollution produced by fossil fuels. So who is adapting to that? Since 1956, when the first solar panel technologies were deployed in the United States, the US has deployed 160 gigawatts of solar energy. Right? China last year deployed 251 gigawatts in 1 year.
My God.
Right? So this is an economy preparing for what comes next. The US, they're going to double down on hydrocarbons, right? Because that's where the money that goes into the political system, is.
That's
right?
it. Yeah.
And so, this is one of these sort of functional issues we have now, because the rate of change, because of technology, because of climate, because of AI, is speeding up. that the more defensive traditional players are of their industry, then the further the gap is going to open up between next generation economies and more what I would call industrial economies.
Definitely.
So by 2050, you're going to see what I would see this delineation, maybe 2040s, of smart economies, highly autonomous, very resource efficient economies, really looking at using AI and these technologies that come, quantum, gene therapy, et cetera, to, give people better quality of life and advance their systems versus industrial economies who are still in this GDP growth and maximizing profit sort of mentality, And so this is a philosophical battle that the planet is going to be on for the next, 20 or 30 years. But yeah.
Fantastic. Talking about exactly about that, smart economies and also the big challenges, and you wrote about that in your two recent books, Augmented and the Rise of Techno-Socialism. So can you say a few things about what are those major changes, and talking about also smart economies, what countries you believe are going to reach that point of becoming a smart economy faster? I don't know if they're located in Americas, in Asia, or Europe. Which would be those countries, and what are those big changes that definitely are going to affect the future of not only financial services but about society in fact.
By 2055, we expect that about 70% of global output will come from the Asia region. Right?
Okay.
So this is obviously dominated by China and India. In 2050, it's most likely that China and India will be the number one and number two economies in the world by GDP, and the US number three. Right?
Oh, okay.
Brazil will be in the top five. Nigeria will be growing as an economy, but the US will be slipping. Because even though they're very focused on growth, they won't be focused on intelligence in the same way. So we look at the dock strike in the ports in the US, last month, where they wanted to stop automation. Whereas China is like, no, we're going to automate the ports. This is the most efficient way to improve our economy. Brazil has an opportunity because Brazil has that greenfield opportunity you talked about, and there's also a need. Brazil's an amazing country with amazing resources, but sustainability needs to become the core focus. Making sure the Amazon is protected and so forth. And I think that Brazil will probably get there. India has a chance to sort of rethink their infrastructure. And I think that will be a part of their technological transformation, because I think India is definitely culturally accepting of technology broadly in society. So I think that you're going to start to see, I would hope, that Brazil becomes a shining example of sustainability and eco-balance in the economy because of the role that the Amazon has to play. Yes. And then you have China being the smartest economy in the world and essentially being the baseline for global trading relationships globally based on autonomy, and the US trying to do whatever it can to slow everyone else down. Right? To keep their traditional, and maybe using their military for blockades and things like that, because that's sort of the power that they have left. But where it gets interesting is if you look at how AI and climate and technology automation in a large scale changes culture. By the 2040s, there's going to be less emphasis on work in the way we have traditionally had it, because so much automation is going to provide our basic needs. And it might start with something like universal basic income, but then you have autonomous health and autonomous transportation and improved food production and things. So what do we do with our time in the 2040s and 2050s? Number one thing is climate mitigation. So you're going to have massive mobilization to make sure our infrastructure survives, more extreme weather conditions, sea level rise, increasing temperatures. And you're going to have a lot of focus on purpose and meaning and the human experience. So economies like Thailand, the Amazon, Vietnam, India for the things like meditation and yoga and things like this. People are going to be looking for the human experience, right? And I think this is how the second half of the century sort of pans out. It's more about human philosophy and the species as a whole advancing, because AI will show us that we need to expand our consciousness in order for humanity to go to the next level. I know this is a far cry from fintech.
No, but that's so cool, because one of the things is just like all the challenges that we're going to face. We need to unite ourselves as a species to try to really tackle those challenges, and maybe in the pace that we've been living up until now, without AI can accelerate, and we're not just so focused on the work that we used to do as before, and now we have more time to think, okay, what makes us a human, and how can we really perpetuate our species, because we're not thinking about that in a daily basis. We'll have time to think about it.
Well, this is really key, because if you look at the trajectory of all of these changes, and it's a lot of chaos and it's messy, but coming out of this, that's the hope, that humanity goes to the next level. But here's the counterpoint. If we don't, and if we stay fighting against each other, nation against nation, tribalism and all of these things, then essentially the risk is existential to the species, that will extinct ourselves. So we have to be consensus building. We have to work together, particularly for climate response, right? If like the estimates by 2050 are, we could have as many as 1.5 billion eco-refugees, people displaced by warming weather, decreased food supply because of flooding and so forth, and 570 capital cities around the world that will be affected by perennial flooding and sea level rise. So in this environment, when you've got so many people displaced, if you're like, oh, we're going to protect our borders, we're going to stop these immigrants from coming in, which is the current posture in places like the US, then this essentially shows that we're not coherent as a species. We can't, look after the planet from that species-wide approach, and ultimately, if we stay in that mindset, then we become extinct. So climate and AI have to shift us to this point of union or consensus building, where we say, look, if the species is going to thrive and go to the next level, we have to work together. And humanity has made our greatest leaps, in terms of progress technologically and intellectually, when we work together. So this is, I hope, what we learn coming through this process.
But I think this, this new vision, I don't know if some countries are getting that right. And you just cite the example of the US, and I think they tend to, use and apply the standard way that has perpetuated then as one of the largest country and the dominant country, just like an empire for this new time that we live. In all the keynotes that you're delivering all over the world, what's the reaction of people when you talk about this? Are they getting it? That they think that it's feasible? For sure, it's a big challenge, but how they're absorbing that?
I think most people, because I've been telling the story for a decade now, so I think I got pretty good at telling the story.
Got it.
And most people can see themselves in the story. They can see the hope that this offers, and they're optimistic. I try and be optimistic with this. And the truth is, we have all of the technology capabilities to solve all of these problems. The problem is not a technical one. The problem is policy, right? And that's the key issue. And what you see is you basically see two sets of responses to this. One is, I really hope this. You've really blown my mind. You've given me hope. What do I need to do to support this direction? Versus the diehard capitalists, which feel it's an attack on the system. Right?
Okay.
So I think I've come to the conclusion that climate and AI at the scale that we're going to see it is incompatible with capitalism.
Okay.
The free market doesn't have a solution to climate change. In fact, the free market caused climate change, right? When you look at the way AI is going to change wealth distribution, again, the free market doesn't have a solution for this. Their solution is, you won't be able to work because the robots will take your job, so we'll give you a salary, a universal basic income, so you can keep buying stuff. Yeah. You can keep consuming, right? This is a very short-term sort of strategy and mentality, right?
Definitely. Perfect. And I think that it's such a shift in the mindset that as a society in many countries are not ready for that, because it's AI and all those changes in the in global in the planet as global warming and everything. So it's a very difficult topic to address for many of those players.
Well, this is why
we need to get through this. It's just like the biggest challenge we're gonna have ahead for sure.
Absolutely, amen. This is why I do what I do.
Yeah, perfect. So we're reaching the end here, Brett, and I think that I'll take this session for you to basically what advice would you give to global leaders, global leaders in general, but also in the financial industry, looking at those different challenges that we're going to face ahead. How can they really, get through this for the coming years?
So whether you're an individual looking at these changes or whether you're a leader in business looking at these changes, there's two things that are going to give you a superpower, and that is mental and technical agility, right? Okay. The ability to change your thinking and embrace new paradigms, and the ability to understand the technologies and technical scientific advances that will get us there and embrace those. The more you want to reflect on the good old days and the past, the more likely you're going to miss the opportunities that present themselves, and you're going to find yourself in sort of narrower and narrower sets of opportunities. So I think that's sort of the broad thing: technical agility and adaptability. And also, I think let's use this awakening with collaborative intelligence, with AI, and with these new tool sets we'll have, quantum and so forth, gene editing, and all of these tools that these technologies are bringing us, to say we do have the opportunity to do things differently moving forward. And we should bring everyone along with us. The problem I have with the system that we have, particularly in places like the US, people in those markets think in terms of winners and losers.
Oh, yeah.
Right? If, I don't care if you lose as long as I win, right? Because me and my tribe, we get the benefits of that. And we just, as a species, that's self-defeating. So ultimately, we have to figure out a way to lift everybody. And, the broad technology advances we're going to have is going to make that affordable and easy to do, particularly when it comes to things like longevity. Yeah. And being able to live longer and access to better healthcare. We're going to be able to make incredible advances in healthcare from a technical perspective, and we're going to make it very cheap to live longer and healthier lives. But it is going to require a shift towards sort of a much different mindset in terms of the role that work versus play and health, has in our life. I think, I'm sort of looking now at every day investing a large part of my day in my health, mentally and physically, because I'm getting in that mindset of what these technologies will enable us to do moving forward.
Fantastic. Well, Brad, thanks a lot for taking the time to be here with us. Can you say a few things about where people can find you, about your next books and stuff, your podcast? Please feel free to use this.
So check out brettking.com if you want to know about me personally. Of course, I'm on all the socials, but also check out our two global placed podcasts, Breaking Banks, the #1 fintech podcast globally, and the Futurist, the #1 futurist podcast globally. And we are launching a futurist event next year in the United Arab Emirates. So that's going to be in April. So check that out as well. And I'm working on some new books for next year. Bruno and I have a book coming out in quarter one next year called Branch Today, Gone Tomorrow. Check that out. And I am working on the sequel to my banking series, Bank 5.0, which hopefully will come out next year as well.
Amazing. I didn't know about that. Banking 5.0 is going to be a very good read.
I'll have you contribute in some way.
Fantastic. So, again, thank you very much, Brad. E você que nos acompanhou até aqui, espero que tenha gostado. Acompanhe o nosso podcast, deixe seu like, faça sua inscrição e encaminhe esse episódio para pessoas que possam se beneficiar dessa conversa que certamente foi extraordinária e diferente de tudo que você tenha visto até agora. Forte abraço e até a próxima.